Welcome to the Larnaca-Conferences 2021. I am Rebekka Manos, and together with my colleague Jürgen Große-Puppendahl, we will jointly guide you through today's session. On behalf of the conference team, it is a pleasure for us to welcome all panelists here in our virtual panel room, as well as our audiences who are following us via the YouTube stream. Hello to you out there as well. The Larnaca-Conferences, established in 2018, focus on the prevailing topics of our age. They function as a social sculpture. The goal is not necessarily to find more answers. We have already enough. What we need is active, intelligently directed interaction between people of different backgrounds, education, and worldviews. To quote Gitta Peyn, what we need is human superintelligence. And it was great to see that during the weeks leading up to the start of the conference yesterday, the forming of a social sculpture across different social media has already begun. The topic of our session today is economy. But before we go more into depth here, please allow a few minutes to introduce the course of the session and welcome our panelists one by one. The Larnaca-Conferences are a series of conferences which each address one of the many burning issues of our time. All participants and all panelists have received the link to the keynote before to familiarize themselves with the thoughts of our keynote speaker, in this conference, Dr. Petra Künkel. During the session, our panel of experts is here to share their viewpoint on the matter and react to the keynote. We also employ a separate chat on Rocket Chat, which is moderated by our chat expert and our online expert as well. It serves to pull questions and to help us to detect blind spots in the conversation. Where possible, we will invite questions and insights from the chat. Additionally, we have a coffee space on wonder.me for further informal get-togethers. Backstage breakout sessions hosted by our panelists will enable discussion and involvement during the second and third hour of each conference. And all of our findings will be published at Karl Auer Verlag. And of course, our hashtag Larnaca-Conferences, and please make sure to spell it exactly like that with the S at the end, the Larnaca-Conferences, can be used across all social networks to foster the growth of our social sculpture. Come and connect with us and others on social media. We are looking forward to discussing with you. And now it's time to welcome our panelists. So, first of all, I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Petra Künkel to you. As an executive board member of the International Club of Rome, Dr. Künkel is thoroughly engaged in thought leadership and collective action for transformation to a world of human well-being and planetary health. She has an in-depth understanding of the interconnectedness between the climate crisis and the current dominant economic system. As the founder of the Collective Leadership Institute, a Germany and South Africa-based social enterprise building collaboration competency for transformative change, she is well familiar with the challenges of implementing global and local transformations. As a seasoned systems scientist, visionary author, and expert in complex multi-stakeholder settings, she promotes systems transformations by scaling up collective stewardship skills for decision makers from corporations, public sectors, and civil society. She is a leading strategic advisor to pioneering international initiatives that tackle sustainability challenges. Based on successful transformation processes, she developed the dialogic change methodology and the collective leadership compass, a guiding tool for navigating change in complex multi-actor settings. Welcome to the panel, Dr. Petra Künkel.
Thank you, Rebekka. I'm happy to be here.
And we are thankful to have you. Furthermore, I have the honor to introduce the founders of the Conscious Leadership Academy, Regina and Dr. Jan Bellermann, to you. Their mission is to empower people to transform. They make a difference as international consultants, keynote speakers, trainers, and coaches, and bring extensive operational leadership experience from international corporations.
Thank you, Rebekka.
Yes, I'm not yet done, but I just need to check my notes here. From international corporations to our panel, yes. In their work, they support the conscious evolution of executive teams and organizations in dynamic and complex systems. Both are highly passionate about vertical leadership development to transform mindsets, explore new perspectives, and inspire leaders to reinvent their ways of thinking and decision-making to create a more purpose beyond profit-driven, inclusive, and sustainable business world. Mrs. Brandt and Dr. Bellermann were so kind as to share a fun fact about themselves with us, which we highly appreciate. So I have the official permission to let you know that Dr. Bellermann is so committed to his work. He once went to the office without realizing it was a public holiday. It gave the security guard a proper surprise, I would say, when he discovered Dr. Bellermann all alone in the office. And we know now that there are no limits to Dr. Bellermann's passion for conscious leadership development. Thank you for sharing that with us. We liked it a lot. And Mrs. Brandt, on the other hand, shared with us that many years ago, she booked a hotel in a nice holiday region at the Indian East Coast, where she had once already been before, and it had been a very pleasant experience back then. So when registering at the reception this time, she was surprised that advance payment was requested from her, which of course she did not agree to. She then got a remote accommodation and started to wonder when none of the other guests showed up for breakfast. After the trip, she found out that the hotel had changed over the years into a popular hour hotel. So now Mrs. Brandt makes sure to pay even more attention to reading between the lines and high context cultures, because clouded by nice memories, we often expect things to be as they were when they actually are not anymore. Thank you for contributing this. Now we are looking forward to the next introductions.
Yeah, thank you, Rebekka. I'm taking over. I have the pleasure and honor to introduce to you Mrs. Joanna Liu from the company Link.EU in China. And I hope I pronounced it well so that you are satisfied with my pronunciation here. Okay, thank you. Joanna believes that all people have priceless values. Her passion is to explore the values of people and turn it into tradable commercial resources. She and her team create an innovative business platform called Link.EU, which in Chinese means neighbors are friends, that focus on the community business. They want to create a loving and sustainable community that can be organized automatically with a long-term local economic prosperity, and the value of people would be amplified in the community. The three interactive scenarios, respectively, are storytelling to inspire and interpret the future lifestyle and make people feel active and hopeful about the trend. Innovation design workshop enables people to collaborate and eliminate self-limitation and excessive competitive habits. Conviviality Club, the self-organized groups that can enhance the matching and integration of information and resources in community. Link.EU is built by the localism working scenario, that people can find jobs or start businesses within a 20-minute walking neighborhood community. And the work will nourish their personal development and with creativity and decent income. At present, the project is still in the early stage of social practice, but they have already discovered several products and services that represent the Oriental charm lifestyle and is imbued with branded value. She and her team will continue to accompany and enable the startup teams until these outstanding brands and enterprises are ready to be shown on the international stage.
Thank you very much, Jürgen. Thanks for your introduction.
Yeah, and I have the pleasure also to introduce a colleague of you, Joanna, which is Mrs. Clara Wong. In this conference, Clara Wong from Shenzhen, China, assists in being a translator if needed for Mrs. Joanna Liu. Mrs. Clara Wong was, among others, senior leadership advisor with McKinsey. Her actual position is Vice President, Human Resources with Coach China. Clara Wong played a key role to enable the business growth and success in China. We are also grateful for having Clara Wong as panelist in the Larnaca-Conference number 8, The Future of Humankind, on November the 28th. Thank you, Clara, for joining this conference.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
That's it. Rebekka? Sorry. I have also the pleasure for introducing to you Peter Matthies from the United States, California. He lives in Santa Barbara, California. Peter Matthies is a former venture capitalist and founder of the Conscious Business Institute. And they state, we are business people, entrepreneurs, and visionaries with a common purpose to build more life-giving organizations. Peter co-founded an IT company and started his career at Accenture in Germany. Peter published 2 books and several dozen articles on business, finance, leadership, martial arts, and technology. Peter is a faculty member of the Goethe Business School in Frankfurt, fellow of the World Business Academy, serves as a global advisor of the Climate Prosperity Alliance, and is on the board of several for-profit and non-profit organizations. And we are also allowed to share something private from Peter. Peter loves spending time at the beach and in the mountains. He gets a kick out of Aikido, capoeira, sailing, and a good dance, which is Zumba, with his wife. Thank you, Peter, for being here.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Right. Then I have the pleasure to introduce, last but not least, Gitta Peyn. And Gitta Peyn is an economist and founder and director of the FORMWELT Institute, initiator of the Larnaca-Conferences, co-inventor of FORMWELT and Weltform, and a systems researcher and cyberneticist. For many years, Gitta has studied conflict systems and subsystems of society, ideological contexts and conditioning systems, and provides new insights into conflict and complexity management via artificial emulations resulting from Weltform research. She is enthusiastic about FORMWELT language-based systemic education and understanding-oriented communication as key factors to the great crises of today and tomorrow. She advocates structure-based transformation processes based on individualized freedom ethics, and writes, among others, for Karl Auer Verlag about her now more than 30 years of research on complex decision-making systems such as human cognition and communication. Gitta loves marzipan and swimming and can talk for hours about language, clarity, and complexity management until all listeners' thinking marbles are smoking properly from all the spinning.
Thank you, Rebekka.
Thank you so much, Gitta. Thank you for also joining us today on this panel. We absolutely look forward to hearing your contribution as well. And with that, we are closing the introduction.
We are entering the panel discussion. And I would like to start to you with a summary of the keynote by Dr. Petra Künkel. In her rich and differentiated consideration of today's economies, Dr. Petra Künkel first presents the crisis-ridden status quo, which is primacy of monetary values, a notion and stance of human omnipotence, a disconnect from the planet, collective irresponsibility. She continues and points out in detail that a lot of the good, such as organic agriculture or regional economies, is already happening. We need to bring the puzzle pieces together. What are her important remedies regarding unleashing a paradigm shift in today's economies? care must be brought back into economic thinking, rearranging the global economic architecture by circular, common good and well-being economy. Dr. Petra Künkel states that repurposing of economies is possible. That's my summary of your very good keynote, Dr. Künkel, and I'm happy that you're here.
Thank you. Brilliant summary.
Thank you. So we are now inviting all of our panelists to give their statements in regards to the keynote. We have told you beforehand that we will do that in alphabetic order, but we have, for, let's say, reasons of excitement, changed the order a little bit, and we would like to invite Gitta Peyn first to join her viewpoint with us and to give the panel a kickoff. And afterwards, we will have your statements in alphabetical order, closing with you, Dr. Künkel, to at least summarize again what you have heard and give your perspective.
Okay, then I start, right? I cannot see you. I have switched to my monitor.
Yes, then I'm sorry. Then you please start. We are looking forward to listening to you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited that you are all here today. When I recorded the keynote interview with Petra Künkel, 1,000 thoughts run through my head, especially about the question of how we can actually recognize that economy is changing, that projects and collaboration are worthwhile. I hear a lot about self-transformation, about personality development, about new organizational structures, especially in consulting scenes. And as important as I find all of this, what I miss is an intensive discussion about our social architectures, which are dominated by our economic and political systems that determine how we think and why most of us find it difficult to refuse participating in global exploitation. My husband and I have spent over 30 years developing models, tools, and programs that do not fit into exploiter cultures to begin with, which has put us in an interesting but extremely exhausting position of experiencing poverty in one of the richest countries in the world and experiencing firsthand what that means humanly and socially. In the process, we were able to get to know people. Modern psychology confirmed what poor people always knew. Wealthy people are significantly less willing to help than poor people. Wealth self-centers. There's more time and money to spend on oneself, but even more, we could experience over and over again that and how those of all people who could concentrate some money and some power on themselves not only broke over and over again the promises they made to those who depend on them, no, even more, they had no problems over and over again to exploit the ideas and products of the less powerful for their own profit and recognition purposes. Let me be very clear here. We have created systems where money and attention go where money and attention already lie. And since everyone needs to make money, everyone is involved in one way or another in global exploitation programs. Worse still, the associated conditioning programs mean that most of us, once successful, no longer see the often questionable means by which we got there and what they have all done to us. When I go out into the world as an inventor of important products, I find that virtually no one reacts to my ideas. Most people react to name, power, and the attention of the masses. In Germany, we have one of the most questionable welfare programs in the world. Whoever slips into the so-called Hartz IV system is treated according to the following pattern. As long as you have your feet under my table, you do what I tell you. It is the pattern of people on the parent ego who treat others like little children instead of addressing them as adults on whose creative power they depend. And this pattern runs through our global predatory capitalist societies, that those who are poor are, in effect, treated differently, no matter how strongly we may claim that that is not the case. All we have to do is look at the slaughterhouses of the world and see the abhorrent conditions in which not only the animals die there, but the workers have to live. Our keynote speaker at the Mass Migration Conference this November 14th, Dixon Twiga, told me that he lived in a slum in Kenya for a year. He first had to build the trust of the people there so that they could believe him, that he really meant well for them. I find that very understandable because my personal experience with many people in positions of power and with money is mostly anything but positive. And power and money are relative. A Heart Sphere recipient in Germany has more to live on than a primary school teacher in village India. My husband and I had less than German Heart Sphere recipients for a long time because we wanted to build something up, and you cannot do that on Heart Sphere because when you get Heart Sphere, you have to be available for exploitative programs. But I could still volunteer to help Heart Sphere recipients even then because my poverty was freely chosen and served a good purpose, so I could keep my dignity. And in my opinion, dignity and respect are the foundations of true social communities. They require adult detachment. They demand non-intrusiveness. They demand that we care as equals, and more than that, they demand that we build social architectures that function humanely. From perspective of our research, I look at society systemically. I analyze the form of the system, which enables me to look away from the content, from the relationship level, and instead pay attention to the form and thus to facts. Form logic and FORMWELT have much in common with the ancient Asian wisdom systems. It is about what is the case, about what is factual and not about what we try to put into each other's eyes. We are facing the greatest crises that humanity has ever known. These are crises with the force of away from the content, ELE, extinction level events. And while we are talking about how we are going to change everything, CO2 emissions continue to rise higher than ever in our industrial history. Garbage mountains continue to grow. We continue to overfish the oceans, and we continue to pollute our environment more and more. And why? Because we have not built the social architectures that make humane living possible across the planet. We urgently need the creative power of all individuals, but we will only be able to unleash this power if we work consistently to ensure that people are able to develop it. And this includes not only better leadership that reflects spiritual values. We have to look what is really happening in practice. And as long as we have such systems as the German Heart Sphere, for example, we have to know something about ourselves. We are still involved in exploitation. We are not honest with ourselves, and we have not reached our goal by far. Remember, it is not the state, it is the people who constitute the state who deny the poor people their dignity and creativity. All exploitation systems have in common that the people who settle in them look for ways how they can exploit themselves and others even better. They then call this their freedom. But freedom is when we create the structures that allow everyone to pursue their individual development and fulfill themselves, to think and work freely in whatever they are interested in, or whatever they recognize as necessary to do to help other people and create a more enlightened and less self-destructive world. Then we succeed in unleashing the creative power of human superintelligence on which we so urgently depend in order to master climate crisis and everything that follows it. And why? Because the systems we have created today not only make us exploiters, corruptible, opportunistic, and untruthful, but also cognitive prisoners of our conditioning environments. You will find it very difficult to build humane architectures with people imprisoned in cognitive social dependency structures. In order to survive socially and existentially, many forced or even willingly unlearn free thinking and to act with dignity and the respect for life. So we have to create economies that support true cognitive social freedom. And that means we corporate leaders, we consultants, we business managers and coaches have to set a good and ideology-free example and also put pressure on politicians to end exploitation and to release people into their own freedom, where they economically well secured without being treated like little children can make their contribution to a better world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gitta, for your panel statement here.
Thank you.
I'm now asking the panelists in alphabetic order to come to their statements. And if I'm right with my own alphabet, the first lady is Regina Brandt. And I would like to ask her to present her panel statement. And if possible, to give a certain comment or comments on the keynote by Dr. Petra Künkel.
Sure. Jürgen, may I ask for a quick change, because Jan and I do it together, and Jan actually does the first part and I come second. So if you don't mind, I would like to hand over to Jan, and he is handing over then back to me.
Yeah.
10 minutes.
The alphabet is still in order.
Okay, thank you. Let's be flexible.
Okay, Jan, it's your stage now. You are muted.
Thank you for your understanding there. Yeah, thanks first of all for the great keynote of Petra here. The point that touched me most was the collective irresponsibility, and Regina and I, we would really love to dive into that part. Why is it so difficult for leaders to step into this responsibility or to accept it? And let's look at the typical view or day of a leader we work with every day. And let's say he or she is maximizing the profit during the day, and then in the evening, while coming home, suddenly we are really focusing on creating a better world for the kids, but we are looking to the politicians to be responsible for that. And while flying, let's say, and enjoying the holidays, we are expecting a proper environment, or we expect a high diversity wildlife. So what we see here is basically that many leaders we work with, they think in three systems. They think in economy, they think in society, and they think in environment. And when we first look into the economy, yeah, the current economy is really run by business leaders who have grown up and have been trained and educated to grow their organization. And traditionally, they're really incentivized to earn money. And I think that's absolutely necessary, because if you're running an organization, you need to make profit, because without the profit, the organization wouldn't survive very long. The second is the society, and the society, I would say, is mainly led by the political leaders, and they traditionally are responsible for state infrastructure, for education, for health, for safety, and many more things there. And then finally, the third one is the environment, and here would say the environment really is just looked after a handful of thought leaders and activists who are sometimes even risking their lives to simply remind us of our responsibility for the planet and all the species. And I think latest since the globalization and the digitalization, what became really obvious is that these three systems, and Petra told it also, is just one big interdependent global system. This is not three systems. So if we lose our life-supporting environment, our society will perish, and without the society, our economy has no workforces. So everything's really related there. And Petra also said that we need a paradigm shift. And the question for me is really today is, who is best suited to drive this paradigm shift? Will it be the politicians? Personally, my view is I don't think so. I think the decision procedures are too slow. Many of the of the politicians are self-interest. Of course, they need to be re-elected, so there's some self-interest there. And in some other countries, I think we lost trust into politicians. And the second is, I think we could look at leaders of social organizations or NGOs or things like that. And I said, yeah, they are driven by the common good, but they have limited resources and they don't have the effective structure to execute. So that really leaves us with the business leaders. And these business leaders, I think if you have a healthy organization, then you have the financial strength, you have the resources, you have very often even the international structures, because compared to the politicians, you can work internationally, you can work globally, and you have the effective execution. So from my personal point of view, the business leaders are really well positioned to drive that change. And if it's that urgent as I personally see it. And I would just read one nice quote, which I found from Willis Harman, the co-founder of the World Business Academy. And he said, business has become the most powerful institution on the planet. The dominant institution in any society needs to take responsibility for the whole. But business has not had such a tradition. This is a new role, not well understood or accepted. So our business has to adopt a tradition it has never had throughout the entire history of capitalism, and that's to share the responsibility for the whole. Every decision that is made, every action that is taken must be viewed in the light of that responsibility. And the question really for us is, why are not many leaders leading that way? Regina, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you, Jan. Yeah, I would like to also to dive a little bit in a hypothesis. And I would like to say when businesses should become a driving force for life enhancement, how Petra calls it, then we also have to talk about transition, because if the transition of people is not supported, and here I'm talking about leaders and their workforce, then or even neglected, then the shift may never happen. Because what we can see in organizations is that the majority of transformation projects fail because of lack of support in the transition of people. And here I include leaders as well. It's leaders, people, everyone. It's a mindset change. And here I would like to dive a little bit deeper into what is exactly transition and what is change, and how are they linked, and how can they make a difference. And yeah, let's start with change. So change is basically external, it's situational, it's relatively fast, and it's focused on the outcome. And examples are, let's say the pandemic, when we were forced overnight to stay at home and to work from home, and we were not allowed to see our family and colleagues. But it's also a good example is also a merger, a reorganization, or let's say a new corporate strategy that could involve climate change goals or the well-being of people, or or just simply burnout prevention. There are a lot of people burning out at the moment, and we see studies, for example, from Microsoft. They say 41% of the working population would like to shift the job this year. So people are moving, and things are getting clearer and clearer. And on the other hand, what is transition basically? Transition is internal, it's psychological, it's relatively slow, and it's a process of reorientation of the thinking and the behavior. And it is focused on how the change affects human. And for any successful business transformation, you need both. You need a change and a transition, because any change works only if people do things differently at the end of the day. And here I'm also referring to to the profit-driven mindset, to the decisions, how they are made. And transition is basically a process through which people go when a change occurs, or the way people reorient themselves to do things in a new way. And not individuals go, or organizations go through transitions, also families and societies do. And I think we are maybe also at the moment in a huge transition anyway, because everything is really changing around us. And every transition involves also 3 phases. And the first phase is the ending phase. The second phase is the phase of an emotional wilderness. And the third phase is the new beginning. And every transition begins paradoxically with an ending and finishes with a new beginning. And people move through all these phases in their own pace. So there's no scheduled target date to hit, so to speak. And the ending, the first phase, involves the letting go of old ways and realities, as well as old identities. And I would like to refer here to the mindsets. What is it? What identities, realities, ways do we need to let go of to really be able to shift to life-enhancing strategies? And this involves also that the people affected by it need to deal with their losses, or those who fear that they might lose something. The emotional wilderness, which is the second phase, this is a time when the old is gone, but the new is not fully functional or feels very comfortable yet. So people get here in touch with the unknown. They don't know which direction they should follow. And tension, frustration, doubt is increasing. And some want to move forward to the new reality, and others want to go back. And at times it feels for them like flying freely between 2 trapezes, and they have nothing to hold on. And but at the same time, that's a time where the conditions for innovation are the best, because all parts are moving, and people are more willing to experiment and to explore new ways. They are more willing to reimagine their lives. And I think that's what a lot of people at the moment are doing when they quit their job, because they reimagine their new life, because they've seen in the pandemic, maybe I want to have a different life. And maybe I want to spend more time with my family and don't be exploited, or whatever they have observed for themselves. And and in this phase, in this emotional wilderness, while it's a very, very uncomfortable time, a critical psychological reorientation is taking place, because people start to think differently, because they explore different ways of doing things, or who they would like to be. In the third phase, in the new beginning, people develop a new identity and experience a new energy, and discover also a new sense of purpose that makes the whole change begin to work. And all these 3 phases, so the ending, the emotional wilderness, and the new beginning, are needed in this particular order. And there are no shortcuts possible. And we see in the business environment we are working in, all just want to go to the new beginning. They don't want to let go anything. They just want to keep it all. But that's not possible. How would you arrive in a new reality without leaving the old horizon behind? And why do you need all those phases? It's just very simple, because people need to do things differently, and they need to stop doing things an old way. It includes also the thinking, because to do things differently, you have to think differently first. And this is happening during a transition. And people need very good support to really get clarity about what they need to let go. How could they reimagine their lives new? And how could we all together arrive in a new beginning? And this is what we would like to explore in our breakout session, because we would like to explore what is so hard for us to let go of, and why.
Yeah. What is blocking the leaders nowadays? Why are we struggling and not making the paradigm shift which is urgently needed? So that's the topic we will explore a little bit deeper in our breakout session. Thank you.
Jürgen? Ich kann dich nicht hören.
Yeah, now I'm unmuted again. Thank you, Regina, and thank you, Jan, for your elaborations on these really important topics. I'd like to give the word now to Joanna Liu to have her panel statements available here for you. Joanna, it's your turn now.
Yes, I'm here. Excuse me, I want to talk some minutes with Clara. Want to confirm my expression on 1 or 2 minutes. Is that okay?
Yes.
Of course.
Clara， 那
Yes.
就是说我跟你 confirm 一下，就是说在我发言之前，就是他们刚才讲的那些东西，可能我大部分能够 get 到他们是在讲一些可持续这些故事。那我是直接去讲我的故事，还是说我需要跟他们就是有一个
不需要，
不需要，
你就直接念用你的内容就好了，非常好的内容。
OK，
直接念你的内容就好了。
好的，好的，Yeah, here. Hello everyone. Next, I will share my story with all of you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really a great honor for me to attend this Larnaca-Conference, and I would like to thank Gitta and the entire organization team and all participants here. Thank you for making this wonderful event happen. My name is Joanna Liu. Today, I will share my observations and experience from China as a first-hand witness of the times, and I look forward to discussions on how we can collaborate to make the future better. I am from Shenzhen, China, a city that has grown rapidly in the past 40 years from a small village to a city known for its leading position in opening up and innovation in China, and perhaps even recognized by the world. It experienced 3 transformations in China's history of reform and opening up. The first was it emerged as one of the most important labor-intensive production centers of China, merged as one of the most important, driven by globalization worldwide back in 1980s. Second transformation saw the city became a high-tech, innovative hub for China 10 to 15 years ago. The third transformation is an ongoing process where my company is a part of, where the local economy is more and more driven by knowledge management, value design, and social technological skills. These 3 transformations have attracted and are still attracting a great number of talents from across China and even across the world to Shenzhen. Shenzhen has grown very big now. Such growth is very fast and too fast. For years, a large number of immigrants have moved to Shenzhen to pursue their dreams. As you all know, China is a huge country. Chinese people are holding very diverse beliefs and values, even within this one country. Many of the immigrants came to Shenzhen. They joined companies here or started their own businesses, and gradually they settled down. They brought with them diverse beliefs and values and all kinds of extraordinary life visions. This forms a kind of mental complexity. I noticed that people here often experience a sense of losing control and imbalance, such as the frustrated talk between grandparents and children, the parents' anxiety about raising child, or disconnections between husband and wives, the uneasy sense of losing their roots and relationships. I also noticed that these disorders had triggered people's dissatisfaction and disappointment on their self-esteem. What could a new paradigm, which enabled people to be part of the local rapid economic prosperity and maintain their self-esteem at the same time, look like? Our insight here is that it is a time for a new form of economic model that is integrated, inclusive, value visible, and rich in care and positive feedback, and could enable easy sharing among people in their daily lives, and could be a driving force for mankind's collective evolution. Driven by our collective desire to find the new paradigm in life, we had launched 零可有, a new adaptive ecosystem of collective relationships. 零 in Chinese means neighborhood, and 有 in Chinese means friendly care. Right now, we focus on offering work to mothers. In this way, the energy carried by the special identity, honor of motherhood will be fully released. We invite local companies or subsidiary of large companies to provide jobs that have a focus on caring or communication in the community, so that mothers can get jobs without leaving the community. Firstly, this kind of caring work can nourish their own life energy. Secondly, they don't have to pay for transportation or spend time and energy running around. They can share the energy saved with families in the community and use the money saved to improve the quality of their own lives. Meanwhile, they can still have decent income as a reward for their efforts. Actually, the very special technique in this ecosystem is that we have a process to deconstruct the traditional tasks and re-engineer the process through the expert behavioral design to produce new jobs, so as to achieve a deep integration of social resources and to upgrade energy efficiency. There are three key stakeholders in this business model: residents of the communities, businesses, and government. We need to activate the core elements of each part: heart flow experience, business capacity, and social capital, which would be reorganized in our system into a process depends on expert design of the visualization interface and a new evaluation mechanism of the tripartite interaction. We call this integration and process a systematical regeneration of adult vitality. This creativity is intrinsically driven by the empathy, inclusiveness, and the nurturing power of feminine energy. So right now, we focus on helping mothers fulfill their mission and dreams. Then we can influence and spread to deeper and further social strata. Although we don't have an exactly mathematical algorithm, no. Our running experience makes us believe that this is leading the realization of human well-being to a much faster speed. Each generation has its own mission and responsibility. In China, President Xi Jinping proposed the concept of a community of shared future for mankind. We, young entrepreneurs, are actively exploring new ways to facilitate ecologically sustainable and balanced economic development. We also refer to the social innovation system theory to work on distributing our practices. I would like to give you an example. In our Linke community, we have a job called Faxbird, which means an expert who at the same time is a friend. We held workshops to train such Faxbirds in our Linke community. In our workshops, there are often creative ideas that originated from the Tao Te Ching, the Diamond Cutter Sutra, and TED Talks. We would like to take the great ideas from the workshops, evaluate them, validate them, then recreate them through expert social design, get feedbacks, and use them in our work. We plan to actively create community maps to visualize and collaborate with the public using action learning methods, the test and learn approach, or the design thinking approaches. So I am very excited and inspired to find that Dr. Petra Künkel's research on life economy and collective leadership. I found the multiple new economic trends she presented were perfectly aligned with what we are experimenting in the community. I look forward to discussing more with her and all panelists here and participants in the next session and beyond. Thank you. That's my expression.
Thank you, Joanna, for your statements here. I'm now called to invite Peter Matthies for having his statement here.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks all for your statements. Really inspiring to listening to you. And I also have to say, Petra, thanks so much for putting all of this together. I couldn't agree more with what you've laid out in a really good way. If we want to create more human flourishing and the flourishing planet, I think your principles are spot on. I really couldn't agree more. When I listened to the talk that you gave, I strongly resonated with it, I have to say. But on the other hand, I was asking the question, how do we get there? How do we do that? And my immediate question was, like, there are so big topics. It's such a complex endeavor that we are having here. It's very easy to push it off to the governments, to say, if we need new regulation, I just go back to my old job and wait for the governments to make decisions. And I don't think that's enough. So we need another component that we want to look at here. The question that I ask myself is, if I'm a CEO of a company, if I'm a mother, if I'm a project manager, if I'm just the front desk person at a warehouse, for example, what can I do? How can I contribute to this transformation? The fact is that it is a tremendously complex transformation that we are up against. And if you look at human history, if we have a lot of complexity in front of our hands, we start surfing Google, or we start buying a pair of new shoes. We get to our daily jobs, but it's because the complexity is so big that it is hard for us to understand how to tackle that. So when we speak with corporate leaders all around the world, whether it's in Australia or in South America or in the United States or in Europe, everybody subscribes to building a more human and a more planetary flourishing. Maybe with a couple of exceptions, maybe with very few exceptions, but everybody subscribes to it. But when Monday morning comes along, they're all back in their old seats. When I speak with them, the conversation is not about the planet. The conversation is not about adding more sustainability. It's about, I have to create more talent for my company. How do we retain talent? I'm so busy. I have 30 meetings every week. How can I manage that workload? How can I solve this project? Good. So most of us don't even think in our day-to-day lives about the impact that our actions have on the environment, on the people around us, and maybe even on ourselves, because we focus on what needs to get done. That's a normal human behavior. We all know, as Jan and Regina laid out, we all know that we need to transform the world, the society, the economics that we are living with. We all know what's necessary to get there, maybe again with a few exceptions. So the big question is, why don't we do it? What's the component that's missing to get us there? I strongly believe that we need both a top-down and a bottom-up approach to make this work. Petra, the principles that you've laid out are partially bottom-up, but also top-down. Rules and regulations are important because if we didn't have them, we would probably still be driving around without catalyst converters. We would still pollute, we would still have lead in our fuel today. So we need this guideline, we need the strong leadership from the top to create these new paradigms, these new regulations. But just one simple example can lay out that that's not enough. If you look at the litter law in the United States, if you're familiar with the United States, you drive along the streets and you see every once in a while signs littering $1,000 fine. That's necessary in the United States because the consciousness, the awareness is not there that you just don't litter. We still find litter when we go out hiking. People leave cans behind, and it's just incomprehensible for me. We were in Switzerland a few weeks ago, and if you go into the mountains, there's not a piece of paper lying around, which you probably all know. So it's there's no law, there's no signs necessary, there's no police force to enforce the laws necessary because we operate on a different consciousness in different countries where it's just not necessary to put anything in place. So we need the top-down approach, but people have found ways always to circumvene rules and regulation, to find loopholes. What is equally needed is the bottom-up approach for us to develop this consciousness, to develop an awareness, not just on a personal level, but on a systemic level, on a scalable level, that can sustain and actually support the changes that we are all seeking, because that's simply how we operate in the world. So there are really two things that I would look at in the breakout group. The first thing is that if we want to change the system that we are working in, we cannot do it with the same consciousness that we're having, because we would recreate the same flaws in the system. So the question that I would like to look at first is, how can we create a consciousness shift on a systemic level? How can we up-level our consciousness, not just by ourselves, which is a challenge in itself, but on a systemic level in an organization of 100,000 people, for example, or maybe in an entire population of a country. The second question that comes around with that is, what is the operating system that we can operate with in the future? Petra, you've talked about the economic operating systems that we're working with, that we need to change that. So what is the new operating system that any organization, maybe even a government, can embrace that would lead them in the future, that would create these new kinds of organizations? And what I would like to look at is not to look at this new operating system as something that companies need to embrace, regulations that they need to embrace, because if we need to do something, then we don't want to do it usually. But it's something that they want to embrace because it opens up new rooms of possibility that they didn't have before. A new operating system that creates organization where people truly want to be, where people belong, that operate sustainably and create an amazing positive impact in the world. That's a possibility that when we speak to leaders, they would like to at least listen to and have a conversation around. So these are the two things that I would like to address. I agree with what you've said earlier. I believe that business is the most powerful institution in the world these days. And that business in a world where trust is eroding, where complexity is becoming more strong, where separation is getting strengthened. And again, trust very strongly eroding, that business can step up to take the lead to create this change for all of us and to foster this change for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for your elaborations on the topic, but also formulating the questions for the breakout sessions. That's very good. I'd like to give back the word to Dr. Petra Künkel to have the opportunity to give a comment on the words of the panelists, her thoughts and ideas about it.
Yeah, thank you, Jürgen. I took some notes and it's quite chaotic. So that's how it is. It's quite chaotic. And, I think that it's also beautiful. Like, I took some notes and I drew some things. What I would like to, kind of take, from what I've heard, all very, very interesting aspects. Some of them I agree, some of them I disagree, some of them make me think, because that is so important. Let me start with something that Gitta said. You talked about dignity and respect. And that is, for me, at the core of any kind of new economic architecture. And I deliberately talk about not system, I talk about architecture, in the sense of an architecture is a certain set of conditions in which something else can happen, and what happens within an architecture can be quite different. So we will be talking about pluriverse approaches towards economic systems. So there will be maybe different economies, but what is so absolutely important, and that's why I refer to Gitta's dignity and respect, and to Joanna, what you said, and Matthies, you talked about, Peter, you talked about life and flourishing, and I think Regina and Jan, you talked about life enhancing. So these are words that have been coming up in the last couple of years. Honestly, 10 years ago, we wouldn't be able to name these words in a panel like this, because people thought, oh, no, they must be a little bit esoteric. So no, it's not esoteric anymore. It's more a responsibility. Dignity and respect are extremely important, because it is the dignity and the respect from people to people and from people to nature that is going to become the new North Star or Southern Cross, depending where you live in the world, that we really, really need. So it is a fundamental reorientation. And this is why I like to work with principles, although I battled a lot with the term principles. Principles, sound a little bit like a dominating top down, and no, they're not dominating top down. It's life works in patterns. Life works according to certain principles in patterns, and what comes out of these patterns is such a beauty and variety and complexity that we actually need to learn from that. Why I think dignity and respect is so important, because I would like to be a bit provocative at the end and say, there is something that is calling the drum beats, the drum beats that make us operate in a system that we all know as we live today, or many people know, it's not working. It's not working for us. It's not working for nature. It's not working for other people, where we still keep jumping on the next plane, or kind of doing the next Peter, that you said, the next whatever quarterly report, that needs to be done in a certain way. And I'd like to bring in one aspect. The aspect is we are living since a couple of thousand years in what I call a patriarchal mindset of extraction. And this is not necessarily about men and women. This is a system that lives at the expense of other people and at the expense of nature. So it is a patriarchal system, and most of the men I know are captives of this system as much as women are captives and victims, and you can say, okay, more women are victims, but some men are also victims. It is a system that is taking us out of balance, taking the world out of balance. And we need to name this as a system, because it's not about renovating patriarchy. We're not going to get into the future by remaining in that imbalanced relationship, but it is about overcoming it. And I think this is a beautiful prospect, because we are really looking at the contribution and everybody's contribution at all levels to generating or regenerating or maintaining our life support systems, our aliveness, our vitality, our flourishing, our life enhancement, etc. And it's quite interesting how these terms really, really are emerging and are being spoken about. So now, if we come to the issue where I disagree a little bit, is I agree and I disagree. And I know I've read a lot about Furhmann, and I really love his work. The issue is that business today is the most powerful actor in the world, and I agree. And at the same moment say that's part of the problem. That is part of the problem that we have walked towards, that there isn't the proper balance, that we need to rebalance, that business has a certain role in world development and social development and societal development, and NGOs have a certain role. And we do have NGOs because many changes in business are the result of the advocacy of NGOs. And governments are important. They're not more important than any other actors, but they may be more important at this stage where you really need to guide transformations. But this is not kind of cast in stone. So it's not that we don't want to go to state capitalism, or we don't want to go to eco-civilization's dictatorship. So the state has a role, the NGOs or civil society has a role, communities have a role, business has a role. And I agree with you, also, Peter, that business can make a lot of difference. But if you talk to Emanuel Faber and to his experience, then even the greatest vision is limited, and the biggest kind of sustainability leader is limited, because we are operating in a system that doesn't allow people to act in a different way, because then there will be always shareholders or anybody else that says, sorry, that's enough. Yeah. So in that way, we need the entire business world to go towards a sustainable and life-enhancing future. And I'm happy to hear, Joanna, what you're doing, because I do think we need to think about business in a different way. And business needs to serve communities. It needs to serve people. We can say many other businesses also serve people, but at the expense of who else? So, and we need the serving, but we need to cut down on the expense of who else? And that could be expense of other people, that could be exploitation and value change, that could be exploitation of nature, etc. So the issue is really that we need a completely new economic architecture, and yet at the same time, and that's the conundrum, is we need to operate in the world that we are operating in, and we need to, as I said, rebuild the highway cross as we are moving across the highway cross. And so in that way, Peter, I also agree with you and say it is really about bottom up and top down. I almost would say bottom up, top down, in between. So it means in the next 10, 20, 50 years, there is nobody in the world who can claim I'm not responsible for this. We have to all do our job. And so it is extremely important to bring in the sustainability leadership and the life enhancing and flourishing into leadership development. And those of you who know me a little bit know that that's where I'm coming from. I'm a psychologist and leadership developer. And that's also why I developed the collective leadership compass and the patterns of aliveness theory. But I've moved to the economic field because my strong experience, unless we change the paradigm of that system, it's not going to work. And now the question is, the one question is the what, and the future needs to be life enhancing and life supporting. I think that's definitely the new North Star. And that needs to be part of a narrative that needs to be as simple as the neoliberal narrative, but like much more inspiring than that. And so the narratives are extremely important, and they need to translate it in different languages, cultures, etc. But the bottom line is life enhancing. But then the question is really, how do we make this operational? And if we look at structures that are let's say going in the right direction, then I must really say the multi-stakeholder collaboration, the partnerships between governments, business and civil society are laboratories of the future. They're actually modeling how the future can operate. And we all know we are on a learning journey. You know, we can probably look into the fog for about 150 meters, but, you know, and we need to walk, we need to do the transformations. But we at every corner, we need to stop and see, it doesn't really work. Yeah. So these things are extremely important. Innovation is so important, Joanna, and I'm really like interested to get more into, it's discussing with you because I believe this is so important. I also know that unless we change our metrics, and most of our governments still kind of progress is measured as if GDP was the only way of measuring human progress. And we know since not only years, but like decades, that this is wrong, and this is taking us in the wrong direction. But it is still the most important part, the growth idea. Growth as such isn't bad, but it's always the monopolizing growth. So we need new governance systems, and in the end, we also need regulations. That is absolutely clear. But we need to have regulations. And Peter, you were talking about Switzerland. Once you settle in regulations in a way, and cultures are different, countries are different, situations are different, but once you regulate, let's say, anchor regulations in a belief, in a narrative, in a society, then people don't litter or do whatever that is the case. But if you don't kind of anchor this in, if that narrative isn't well enough anchored, then of course regulations don't work, and you have to police regulations, and that's going to be the transaction costs are much too high. So kind of as a summary, yes, new North Star is life enhancing, and building that life enhancing economies is a job of everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, Petra. Thank you very much. Before we go into the pause and in the afterwards breakout sessions, I'd like to introduce to you people who were in the background for the first part of our conference here, that are moderators, online experts and chat moderators. Maybe you can introduce yourself with one short introduction, your name and what you're doing here.
Or go ahead. I would just say, Dominik, you're first. Okay, my name is Robert Furhmann. I'm a consultant for organizations, and I'm coming from a system theoretical background. And I was listening very carefully to the sentence which have been said here, because I find it very important to work on structures, not on people. And I think this is a main key to success to bring this whole topic forward.
Thank you. Christine?
I'm working with Gitta and Peter Matthies, so I'm very honored to take these two panelists within my breakout session in a few minutes.
Dominik?
So yeah, my name is Dominik. I just had the fascinating role to be the expert in the chat room, which was really good. There's a lot of things we have talked and discussed about, especially to what you guys will talk about in the breakout rooms. So just for reference, what I'm doing, so I try to create and offer epistemic learning experiences, which come from various, so to speak, business inputs, from quality to lean and so on. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dominik.
Right. So thanks for being here, Dominik and Robert. And we are curious to hear anything that we missed that maybe came up during the chat, any blind spots you could help us to detect here?
Yeah, so what came up in the chat was especially related to the topics which have been brought up, but a bigger area was occupied by the discussion what can be done in the care sector, where we have a very stressful situation, either on the elderly people or handicapped people, but also in the normal care people for sick or ill people. And there was a discussion going on, how can be the thoughts you have mentioned in your speeches can be incorporated. So there was so to my understanding, a straight question: how can we come into work? How can we become practicable? So how can change happen? So this is quite interesting to not be on the meta level, dive into what can be done, what should we do with the colleague next Monday.
Yeah, and I would like to add on what I've observed. And well, from my perspective, there was a lot of talks about artificial boundaries, I would call it. And then some parts are referring to how can we mobilize some of the ideas that are floating around? How can we mobilize the consciousness, the paradigm shifts, and then what exactly to work on?
Thank you so much for sharing that, Dominik and Robert. I think absolutely helpful additional thoughts that we can take with us to the backstage breakout sessions. And with that, I think it's time to close the first part of our conference today, the panel discussion. Thank you all so much for contributing. And also thanks to our audience on the YouTube stream for staying with us until now.